In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to God, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, most gracious, most merciful, Master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and your aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those upon whom you have bestowed your grace, those whose portion is not rage, and who go not astray. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. La ilaha illallah. Life is to be united with Him through love. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. God alone is real, and the goal of life is to be united with Him through love. invocation?
I would love to. It is about that time.
All right.
Would you please
And then
lead?
I'll do Al-Fatiha.
Oh, you okay? Okay.
And then we'll go into the chapter.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Please mute yourselves except Talat. Invocation. O thou, or rather, towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance, towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the message, the mystery, the Spirit of guidance. One more once, towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the message, the mystery, the miracle, the mother, the Spirit of guidance. Talat.
Al-Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawm Din. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين صدق الله العظيم. So welcome everybody. My name is Talat, and Hassan has made it possible for me to share this with you. We're going to take a look at the text for the Physicians of the Heart, Chapter 8, Families of Divine Forgiveness. There we go. So basically, this is about 4 names, although actually it'll be 6 names when we're done. But Ghafar, the absolutely unconditionally forgiving, and Ghafur, the one who penetrates with forgiveness, Tawab, God who turns his face always towards you, and Afu, the one whose forgiveness is so complete that it's like sand washing away footprints from the desert. So they start out by saying that these names are about self-worth and for dealing with problems of self-loathing and shame such as that. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. And that these names are for remedying psychological wounds. And they tell the whole story in here about how they were wondering about Muntaqim, which is a name that in most of the books gets translated as the Avenger. And they were looking at the fact that right next to that name on the list is Afu, which is this unconditional forgiveness, which is like the sand blowing the footprints away in the desert, like that. So Ghafar is the first level of this family of names of divine forgiveness. And you probably can see, if you look at the 2 names, Ghafar and Ghafur, that they both come from the same 3-letter roots, the GH letter, the F, and the R. Again, GH, F, and R. Those are the 3-letter roots, and the 3-letter roots are stuck into the structures, the patterns, the forms, and that helps to shape the meaning, the particular exact the nature of the meaning of the word for the layers of meaning. So in the case of Ghafar, the form of the word means that whatever the quality we're talking about might be, it's continuous and repetitive. And there's a wonderful story that's told here about a Bedouin who confesses to the prophet that he keeps doing something sinful, and the prophet says, just ask for forgiveness. And the man finally says, doesn't God get tired of forgiving? And Prophet Muhammad says, no, God doesn't get tired of forgiving, but maybe after a while you'll get tired of doing those sinful actions over and over again. So it's the invitation to return. So Ghafar and Ghafur go together as a nice pair. Ghafar is the unconditional, absolute forgiveness. Ghafur is the forgiveness that is directed into, penetrating into every atom of the being, right into the essence of a thing. So what they call it the sound code, I just call it the pattern or the structure or the form. But sound code is a fine way to call it, and that's the way it's called in the book. That it's the structure, and this particular structure of that Ghafur is in with those vowels means penetrating right into the essence of a thing. So they said that Al-Ghafar is a remedy for a chronic condition, and Ghafur is for an acute condition. Ghafur is the forgiving of what's even unimaginable to forgive, and it involves giving up grudges. You have to give up the grudges that you hold about the inner wound that you have that you believe to be unforgivable. And in a little while we'll talk more about the wounds, perhaps. It comes up later in the chapter. So giving up the grudge is really the key. And they point out that a physical, a tangible way to think about the quality of ghafara, forgiveness, is that one of the roots, one of the uses of the root means a substance that bees make, that the Arabs used to cover leather water skins as a sticky substance to repair cracks in the water skins. You can't have cracks in water skins, especially in the desert. And so, very important point that the repetition of Ya Ghafar, Ya Ghafur brings overcoming of brittleness of character. So, before we go on to Ya Tawwab, let's do 11 times Ya Ghafar, Ya Ghafur. So let's go Ya Ghafar, Ya Ghafur, 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 Ya Ghafar, Ya Ghafur. So those are the two basic names of forgiveness. And then they've added in as to make a family, or sometimes they call it a cluster of names, the name Tawab. Tawab means turning and returning, and is often used in a way that is like what we mean when we say repentance. It's the turning away from perceived defects and shadows and facing directly toward the divine perfection, turning toward God and God turning toward you. And in this book they point out that there's the Hebrew equivalent teshuvah. Some of you may have heard of teshuvah. It means turning, returning, and repenting and atoning, like that. The structure of tawab, the sound code as they call it, it means that whatever this tawab quality is, it's being done continuously, without beginning, without end, or without interruption. A tawab is always turning towards you without interruption. and it's related to our sense of the word repentance and of letting go of grudges. So there's a hadith quoted here, beautiful hadith that says, if you make a mistake and ask for forgiveness, Allah will immediately turn your grief and sorrow into joy and gladness. God will give you sustenance from an unknown source and will deliver you from all difficulties and hardship into ease. And the comment here about that hadith is that this is a tawab in action. The word tawab has in front of it AT instead of AL. This is the nature of Arabic grammar, that some words the L gets absorbed and eclipsed into the next letter. So it's at-tawab is how you say it. So that's tawab, God turning God's face over to you, the sense that wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God. So let's say at-tawab 11 times together. At-tawab, 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 at-tawab. And there's always also the option that instead of saying at-tawab, meaning the one who always is turning his face, that you can say ya tawab, oh, you who are always turning your face. So let's just do that 11 times with the ya instead. Ya tawab, 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 ya tawab. Now we have next ya afu, which I know is one of the favorite names of one of our beloved friends. It's the ultimate sign of forgiveness, the ultimate stage of forgiveness. It's so much forgiveness that it totally obliterates and overlooks and forgets the faults that might be involved in what's meaning to be forgiven. As I said before, the visual image from one of his form is the wind blowing across the desert and completely erasing all the tracks in the sand, all the footprints. So in the first stages of forgiveness, you know the possibility of forgiveness, and you might be thinking about the fault that the person committed against you that you're having to forgive. But with afu, this is such complete forgiveness that there's no trace of the fault even subtly retained. It says here with al-ghafur and al-ghafur, you see the shadows. With at-tawab, we notice some patches of light and shade. But with al-afu, there is none of that. You no longer have any negative connotation about whatever events have happened to you. So with afu, it's absolution, gone like the footprints in the desert after the wind. And it's pointed out at this point, the famous phrase we all say frequently, astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah has the same root of ghafara, G-H-F-R. Astaghfirullah, it's called the 10th form in Arabic. It says here that that form means that the thing is, whatever the quality of ghafara is, whatever the quality of forgiveness is, in this form, the forgiveness is penetrating and continuous. Also, not only just penetrating and continuous, but they might have also said it's a form of seeking. When you say astaghfirullah, you're saying, I am seeking the ghafur. I am seeking the forgiveness from God. Astaghfirullah. And Rabia al-Adawiya, 9th century great Sufi, 8th and 9th century great Sufi woman saint, used to say astaghfirullah to Allah for having to say astaghfirullah. She wanted forgiveness for still needing to overcome that eye of separation. So with al-afu, there's no more ego wound self-identification. And in the spiritual state of this matter, there's no barrier between you and al-afu itself. You are al-afu. Okay, so it's about removing the grudge, eliminating self-blame, learning to forgive yourself. As I said before, Al-Ghafar, as it says here, is so merciful that it never wavers through failure after failure. So it's about giving up the grudges. Al-Ghafar, Ya Ghafur are paired and said together over and over again to deal with the wounded condition that people have. And we'll be talking about some of the wounds in a minute, the family hole and the self hole and the divine hole. So very important point that this book, really uniquely makes is that you can't just throw synonyms at these divine names, that they have to be understood by paying attention to the root, the three-letter root, like Ghafar, which is the forgiveness, and the structure in which the root is embedded. And those two things provide the meaning of the words. So these names are also in divine relationships with each other, just like Ghafar and Ghafur are from the same root, Ya Ghafar and Ya Ghafur. But they just have different forms to emphasize different dimensions of the meaning. Repetition of Ya Tawab, going back to the name Tawab from before, reminds us that the all-forgiving one is facing us all the time. Wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God, it says in the Quran in chapter 2, verse 115. And Ya Tawab helps people deal with grandiosity, because those who suffer from grandiosity are turning toward themselves rather than to God, seeking solutions from themselves. And that grandiosity is a defense against vulnerability. So the basic root of Tawab has the meaning of someone turning their face towards you. Turning your face away is rude, but turning your face towards someone is considered polite. And the forgiveness at the level of Tawab advances then into Ya'afu, the forgiveness of absolute forgiveness, as if the wind washed away the footprints on the sand. So they go back now to Muntakim, the name that is book I was looking at today gave as for Muntakim, suggested the rectifier. 2 chapters ago we talked about Muntakim, and it was suggested that we should think about Muntakim as a balancing force. That's the kind of vengeance that it's talking about, balancing. So Aziz is the name of divine transformation, and Muntakim is the name of balance and rectification. The name Al-Aziz is the key to a person's needed transformation from a revenge-oriented ego structure. Al-Aziz is a very interesting name because the root Aza can mean sweet, like you say Azizi to a guy. If you say Ya Hassan Azizi, that means, oh dear Hassan, oh sweet Hassan. If you say Ya Rehana Azizati, then you're saying, oh dear Rehana, in the feminine form, Azizati. Aziz is God's power as a refined strength that is rare and graceful. And that to forgive is a kind of fana, or the dissolving of self. Very interesting point there. So the relinquishing of the ego power, this is why Sufis say astaghfirullah so much. So let's do 11 astaghfirullahs together. We'll do it in the classical form of astaghfirullah al-azim, astaghfirullah al-azim, astaghfirullah al-azim. So let's go. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. 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 And so we have Astaghfirullah, we have Gafar, Gafur, Tawab, and Afu. Afu being called here the station of the divine. Here's a little bit about Muntakim, about that idea that Muntakim is more like the rectifier or the balancer rather than the avenger. Al-Muntakim erases the imbalance of the energies, the imbalance of the passions. And then it goes on to talk about the name Afu. Afu heals the wound on the emotional level, and Al-Muntakim addresses the wound on the level of primal impulses or passions. Ya Ghafar, Ya Ghafur, Ya Tawab, Ya Afu. By the way, when you look at Ya Afu, I'll put the arrow over the name Afu over here. There's an apostrophe in front of the A. That apostrophe is more significant to the word than is the A that follows it, because that apostrophe is one of the root letters of the name Afu, which is based on the letters Ain, Fa, and Wow. Afu. The A is just the vowel. In Arabic, vowels are just sort of like vowels. They have value in the structure of the word, that part of the meaning that is given by the word's structure rather than, say, from the word's root. Reciting a tawab is like a state of perpetually remembering to gaze at the face of the beloved. In al-afu, there is no false self to grasp. So he talks about the family whole, the self whole, and the divine whole. So some of us come from families where there were things missing in the family, absence of a certain quality, maybe missing heartfulness, maybe missing intelligence, maybe missing will. Then there's the aspect of the self, where the self as a whole, where the self feels deficient, insufficient, and that kind of experience. That's one of the wounds that we carry. And then the divine whole, where we think that God has abandoned us, sort of the dark night of the soul, where we feel abandoned by God. That's a particular kind of wound. That a layer of shame or deficiency in the self, the self whole. By sincerely calling on Ya Ghafur, a veil is removed. And Tawab is, it's pointed out here that Tawab is related to the word Tawajjah, which comes from the word Wajh, which means face, Wajh. You say about Ali, Karamallah Wajahu, when you talk about Hazrat Ali, Karamallah Wajahu, may God ennoble his person. But the word is actually face, but we mean person when we say face in that sense. So like that. The stage of Tawbah is the facing. You turn toward Allah, and you find when you're healed that the nature of your soul is goodness. With al-afu, there's no more any distinction between the lover and the beloved. The lover and beloved are the same, one and the same. It's God loving God. When we're loving, we're God loving God. So those are the three wounds that are talked about. And these four names, Ghafar, Ghafur, Tawab, and Afu, are particularly efficacious at healing the wounds that were just discussed. And there's the description of the divine whole. What have I done to make God turn away from me? In Tawab, Tauba is the root of the name Tawab. Tauba is the act of the turning, of the facing. You repent from your own action of creating duality in the process of repentance. You repent from your own action of creating duality in the way that you repent, because you set it up as a dualism in yourself. When the duality is resolved, you've entered into the realization of al-afu, right? So that's the basic sense of the chapter of the family of the names of divine forgiveness, as best I understand those. There everybody is. Anyone have any comments or questions? You can ask later too. We'll start looking at a little bit of chapter 9, which is names of divine omnipotence. Okay, so we'll start doing some of that today. So hang on one second. All right, so this chapter is filled with a quantity of names. Qahar. I won't give a definition of Qahar, but I'll tell you that the city of Cairo is Al-Qahira, from the same root. And then Jabbar, which is the name that the root for algebra comes from. Qawi, which is strength. Aziz, Dhal Jalali wal Ikram, it's one of Kanan's favorites. Qadir, Muqtadir, and Mateen. These are the names of divine omnipotence, modalities of omnipotence, the names of power and strength. So this very first paragraph is this very important point that you can't just use English synonyms easily with some of these names. They have very sophisticated and subtle meanings, and that you have to look at the roots, and you have to look at the structure that the root is embedded into in the name. And you have to do that kind of relational approach that allows you to do wazifa being the practice of doing zikr, of reciting the names and meditating on and contemplating the names. So this chapter starts out talking about Ya Aziz, which I think was discussed not only in the previous chapter, but a few chapters ago. But the form of the word, the structure, in fact, they use the word structure here, form, pattern, structure, sound code, means that whatever this thing is that's Azza is given to each and every atom in the universe without distinction, total givingness. And Aziz is an interesting word because it can mean sweetness, as I was explaining before about Ya Hassan Azizi, but it also can mean strength, Aziz meaning greatness and strength. And it's also the name of a baby eagle, which is a strong bird, of course. So this is the name for developing genuine self-worth. It says here that Al-Aziz is the power of God itself. You experience Izzah, the root of that name of strength, with all the inevitable fluctuations of your life. So back to the discussion of wounds, the wound of humiliation, the wound of shame that most people carry. At another level, there's a wound of shame that we feel toward God because many of us feel abandoned by God. So it's a strength, it's a value and strength that existed before time began. Absolutely classic. Someone who's called Abd al-Aziz, Abd, the servant of Aziz, the great one, the strong one, is one who's not identified with their small self. So in Aziz helps to balance names like Muntakim and Mudhil, the humiliator, and allows for a balance among those. In the sound structure, it's continuously flowing from the source of all. So that's Aziz. Ya Qahar. So it mentions the sound code that this name, let's go back and take a look at it again, has in the middle of it two H's. So it's a doubled middle letter, meaning that whatever it is perpetual and continual. Now, the physical, tangible metaphor that we can use from one of the applications of the root of kahar is that like the effect that fire has on a piece of meat. So they're suggesting to think about the strength that al-qahar is, that victorious or maybe dominating characteristic that's al-qahar, victorious, as in the sense of what fire does to meat, that kind of victory. And as I said before, the city of Cairo in Arabic is from this same exact root, al-Qahira. That's how we got the name Cairo, the 1 after 9. Okay.
Want a drink?
Yeah. Actually, I've got one here, thanks. So another meaning of qahar is that which is continually overwhelming everything else. It's a remedy for a cold heart and for developing passion. So applying the meat metaphor, the self burns up, but the light is still there. And I'm not sure that, let's see, about Moses, that he hears about the burning bush. And this is called ilmul yaqeen, the knowledge of certainty. And then he sees the burning bush, and that's ayn al-yaqeen, the essence of certainty. And then when he becomes the flame, when he himself becomes the flame of that burning bush, this is called haqqul yaqeen, the reality of certainty. Okay?
Does that have truth in it? Haqq?
Yes, haqqul yaqeen, the truth of certainty, the reality of certainty. Haqq. Continual flame of passion and yearning. When you surrender to al-qahar, then you feel resurrection and exaltation. This is like what turns coal, C-O-A-L, coal into a diamond. Now, we come upon one of my favorite of the names, which is Jabbar. I love the way it sounds, I love the way it looks, and I love the funny fact that the word algebra in English comes from this particular root of Jabr. Al-Jabr in Arabic is algebra, and Jabbar is from that. But the physical metaphor that they give that's very helpful is that it can mean, one of the applications of the root can mean setting a broken bone to heal it. And the sound code, having the doubled middle letter, means it's a continuous activity. Ya Jabbar, Kareem Abdul Jabbar, mender of bones.
Perfect for our Jabbar.
Yes. Very important and interesting point that each name has a jawhar, a jewel. Jawhar can also mean essence in a sense, but it means jewel. It is, well, it says it's like an essence, yes, of course. With Al-Aziz, we find self-worth and strength. With Al-Qahar, there is a burning power that transcends time. Al-Jabbar brings this brilliant flowing strength to continuously heal and integrate our fractured existence. So that's Al-Jabbar. Yeah, very interesting name there. And you know, in this book, before we go on to Yaqawi, chapter 4 is a tough read, but it's worthwhile to take a look at some of it and see how the structures of the words impart some of the meaning that the word has in chapter 4. And in chapter 5, there are short little miniature definitions of these words. They're not so miniature. I mean, they're probably, most of them are 25 to 50 words long, which is very helpful. But I like the way that these names are unpacked in these longer, later chapters. We're in chapter 9 right now, and I was referring just a moment ago to chapter 5, which allows you to quickly look up any of the names and get a quick take on what the name is about. So chapter 4 is very useful for understanding this thing about the roots and the structures, which is what makes everything happen. Al-Qawi gives us strength to resist. Qawi is also a power. There's a root for meaning for Al-Qawi of emptying a house. There's a juicy wine-like essence that fills the body with ecstatic passion, and they call that the pomegranate essence. I just thought I'd share that. That seems like a lot of fun, right? The negative counterpart of the pomegranate essence would be the passion without sobriety. Hazrat Inayat Khan said, "I am the wine of the divine sacrament. My very being is intoxication. Those who can drink of this cup and yet remain sober will certainly be illuminated. But those who cannot assimilate it will become objects of ridicule in the eyes of the world." Al-Qawi is the strength that comes from the emptiness of self. Al-Qawi commands and disarms the commanding self. So just to make sure that we understand, there's what are the 7 levels of the self. The lowest one is the commanding self, called the Nafs al-Amara. Then there's the conscience, the self of conscience, the Nafs al-Lawama. Then there's the self of inspiration, Nafs al-Ilham. Then there's the tranquility, self of tranquility, Nafs al-Mutma'inna. Then there's the self that is pleased at God or with God, Nafs al-Mardiya. Then there's a self that pleases God, Nafs al-Radiya. Then there's the self that is pure, sometimes called Nafs al-Zakiya and sometimes called Nafs al-Safiya. And people who call it Nafs al-Safiya are thinking about Safi, or the root Safa, for purification, as being the root of the word for Sufism. The word Sufism has 2 etymologies. The primary etymology is wearing of wool, W-O-O-L, wearing of wool, like John the Baptist with his camel hair coat. The secondary idea is that safa, the purification, is at the root of tasawwuf, the word for Sufism. So the blaming self is the awakener, awakens you from the commanding egotistical soul. Okay, Yamatin. Sometimes I've seen this translated as the firm. In the sound code or the structure, it has a divine strength that is functioning in all circumstances and in all situations without exception. All right. Mastery is another word for al-matin. Kind of interesting. Stability is another sense of what ya-matin or al-matin means. Matin is compressed and very solid. It has to do with the strength of the will to be in the world. The meaning of matin is to have a solid foundation. The absence of matin leads to pessimism. Recitation of yamatin for those who are not consistent or who lack the foundation to function well in the world. So I want you to recite yamatin for those who lack consistency or a foundation to bring balanced progress. Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram. And just in case you're curious, if it matters to you, you often see this as Dhul Jalali wal Ikram. But when the ya gets inserted in front of the phrase, the word dhul becomes thou. It's just a grammatical thing of the shifting of vowels. So it comes from two names, Jalal, which is the majestic and awesome, and Ikram comes from Karim, which is nobility and generosity. And in the Quran, Allah gives takrim. Takrim is a form of the word from Karim and Ikram. Takrim to Adam gives nobility to Adam, nobility and generosity. That's why the angels fell on their faces in prostration and sajda, because of the takrim they saw that God had given this creature Adam and Eve such nobility and generosity. Jalal is the strength inherent in the source. Al-Karim is an infinite receptivity of heart. And if you are fully aware of the flowing of takrim in your heart, you're engaged in mushahada, which is nicely translated here as awe-filled witnessing. Mushahada. Mushahada, like the word shahada, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah. Shahada, this is mushahada, which is related, grammatically related from the same root, shahada. Shahada and mushahada. So, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram is a golden condition of generosity. Invocation of Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram brings a needed balance to the condition of being overly attached to the acquisition of power. Ya Qadir, Ya Muqtadir. Both of these come from the same root, QDR, Qadir and Muqtadir. Qadar is divine purpose. Qadar is a point of faith. Qadar is like predestination or destiny. So divine purpose is a very nice synonym for predestination and destiny. Muqtadir acts directly on us. Muqtadir means the power that is flowing from the source to its recipient back and forth. That's what the insertion of the T does in terms of the structure of the word, the shape of the word, the form of the word, the unlimited capacity. The basic verb qadra means to measure cloth with your hands, and the idea of the value that you find by so measuring it. Qudra is the root noun, power, from this root, of this root, is the root, means to equalize. And it also means ability, courage, and prowess. There is a second set of meanings: natural, innate, and instinctive, as well as the idea of worth, merit, and value. So Al-Qadir and Al-Muqtadir both have to do with fulfilling or discovering your destiny. So those are the names of divine omnipotence. So, there we go. Thoughts? Everybody can unmute at this point if that's possible. Love to hear anything you have to share. Your experiences with these names, your thoughts about these names.
Talat,
Mm-hmm.
you hear me?
Rehana, yes, I hear you.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, and I might be confused about this, but a little while ago, you mentioned tasawwuf. And isn't tasawwuf also what Muslims do around the Kaaba? Like one of the ceremonies they do around the Kaaba?
Close. That's called tawaf.
Tawaf. Okay.
Tawwaf. But yeah, tasawwuf kind of looks like tawaf.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
maybe when some people do tawaf, maybe they do it in such a way that they're doing tasawwuf when they do tawaf.
Yeah,
Because
maybe.
of their sincerity.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Talat, while we're discussing, can we come out of screen share for a while?
Oh yeah, let me take down the book. Oh, it's up here. Here we go. Ah,
There you all are.
Very clever.
Shamsuddin, that's very clever there with having Hazrat Nayad Khan behind you. He's got your back.
He's backing me up.
Great.
I loved talking about Afu and myself, like many people, I've had lots of things to forgive and shame and guilt and work through that. But I was really blessed to have a Murshid who actually lived in the state of Afu. And after 25 years, I finally started getting it. But this man lived in that state of Afu, letting it go and not holding on to it and, doing what was right, the hawk part of it all. And I really enjoyed that part of this evening, listening to that and thinking about Murshid Kabir and how much I've grown up under that and how powerful these practices are if we use them.
Yeah, those of you who know Murshid Kabir I certainly feel a lot of insight in that particular insight about Afu. Very, very, very helpful. I only once saw him get angry and I deserved it. We were singing Christmas carols and we just sung Gloria. And we ended the carol and I went, Gloria, Gloria, Gloria. He didn't like that.
At all.
But otherwise, he never got angry. He was always calm, it seemed to me. I didn't know him as well, so, you know other things. But
I mean, he had moments, but he recovered quickly, but
Yeah.
he was born, with that, how some people are born with innate personalities or things, but I think he always had that Afu alive in his heart. Don't you think, Shamsuddin?
Absolutely. He did not remember your sins or your weakness or anything. He always
I can
overlooked
hardly
them.
hear you.
I think I had my thumb on the microphone, maybe. Is that better?
No.
Uh,
Talk loud.
hello,
Whoa.
hello, hello, hello. Better?
No.
No. Hello?
Talk loud.
I'm going to
What?
raise my speaker volume and see
That
if that
might help.
helps.
That might help. Everybody else can hear me. Yes.
Okay,
Javier,
so
Javier was,
here we go.
I was always amazed at how much he overlooked in his murids.
No, I don't think he overlooked it. I think he took it all in and let it go and identified our weaknesses and our strengths. I don't think he didn't see it.
No, we're saying the same thing. He overlooked it. He saw it and overlooked it.
Overlooked it. Okay. I think he made us work with it too.
Actually,
It's
I
really
was
to listen to all this, but I especially loved. Thank you very much for talking about Afu and Gafur.
Great, glad you heard it.
Yeah, I was right here.
That's wonderful.
What'd you say, Sharon?
I was just going to add a little bit to that, that you actually are permitted to see much, much more based on how much of Afu you can encompass. Your perception is added, and your ability to see worse and worse things in others, because you're not a danger to them because of your ability to process and forgive what you see. So they're kind of hand in hand.
I mean,
Yeah, that's the beauty of this book, having the names in clusters. Really useful, the relativity, relationality. Very useful.
relationality.
Relationality, yeah.
It's a new word.
Is that a word, Sharon?
Not exactly, but I'm sure somewhere. Look, English is spoken all over the world by so many different cultures. Somewhere it's being used.
Academia.
Like where?
In academia.
Talat
Help me
just
out
used
here,
it.
friend.
But yeah, no, it works. It's useful.
Yeah, I really like the forgiveness wazifas. You know, Astaghfirullah Ya'afu is my favorite lately. But the whole idea that there's a process that can be accessed to bless us with a clean slate, to just, wow. I mean, it's like, you know how rich and valuable that is? It's like, it's like, wait a minute, we have tools to access it. Because why do you need a tool? Because you don't think it's already happening. Even though it's already happening, Yatawab, it's already happening, but we don't believe it. So we need a tool to convince ourselves that, yes, the slate is being wiped clean with every breath. And it's kind of like, I must be really dense. I don't get it. And so we're not dense. So what do we do once we get it?
I think we are dense, Hassan, and I think that that's why we do these practices for years over and over, and the same kind of stories and the same mantras and the same. I think we are dense, but maybe all these practices are helping us be more malleable, but I think we are dense.
I would agree with you that we are dense in the sense of dense, rising above the denseness of the earth. Take us into thy
Praises from
I
the
think you described
song.
I'm dense,
Take us
man.
into thy parental arms, raise us from the denseness of the earth. That in that sense, yes, we're dense. You know,
Hey,
we're
Talat,
stuck in this humanity. You know, we're stuck
Talat,
in humanity.
Talat, remind, there was a new one for me to use. You used another wazifa with astaghfirullah, and then you went astaghfirullah. What was the?
Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Azim, the great one, like Azim Miller.
Okay, astaghfirullah al-azim.
Yes, Astaghfirullah al-Azim. That's how we do
Say
it.
it slow so he can hear you.
Astaghfirullah al-Azim.
Astaghfirullah al-azim.
There you go. Now just speed it up a little bit. That's the way I've always seen it, you know, in with Sharif Baba and also with the North African tariqat that I studied with for a while.
Well, it kind of makes sense too, because you're not just asking for forgiveness. You're asking for the strength that comes when you know you're forgiven, and you know, and astaghfirullah for having to ask for the forgiveness in the first place.
And the forgiveness has power.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, Kabir always used to say, astaghfirullah doesn't mean just God forgive me. It means help me get my ego out of the way.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it's our ego that makes us dense.
Maybe.
Or maybe it's our ego that keeps us dense.
It plays a role, definitely. Ego plays a role in the denseness.
Yeah, man. So the tools are for our ego self.
Ultimately, yeah,
I,
that's the part of us that most needs it.
you know, because, you know, I'm kind of like just, you know, really examining myself. Tawab, it's always happening 24/7, 365.
Right.
Hopefully.
I get that. So it must be my ego self that is like, what was that word? You used a real fancy word about the ego self. Grandiosity.
Oh, grandiosity, yeah.
Yeah, $1
Grandiosity.
million word.
Mm.
You know, it's the ego standing up and saying, I'm not done being done with being done.
You sound like our ex-president.
Right.
Let's not go there.
Oh boy. Yeah. So not only are the esmas for the ego, but also remember the esmas are for the heart.
I mean,
Get
The
two for one.
grandiosity, as I understand it, is just it's just a cover. It's just a cover for the vulnerable self. But speaking of self, Talat, you mentioned the different selves, and I had never come across that before. Could you maybe repeat that or refer to where that's
Sure.
from?
Yeah. There's a very nice little book called Essential Sufism by Robert Frazier, also known as Rajib Frazier. Shirin knows.
Ragib.
Yeah.
Ragib. They
Ragib.
pronounce it.
And James Hillman. It's from Harper and Row. That's one book that has a very nice, brief presentation of this. But the lowest ego, the commanding soul, the nefs al-amara, is the dominating soul or the commanding soul. And that's what everybody is proficient at, right? Then the next level up is the nefs al-lawama, the soul of or self of, soul of conscience, sometimes called the blaming self. This is the one that does moral inventory, you know, checks your lower ego out, asks, what are you up to? What are you doing? Are you serving God or are you serving the ego? This kind of thing. And when you do that kind of house cleaning, you get into the soul of inspiration, nefs al ilham or nefs al mulhim, and you have this very inspired state. And this is a little tricky because you could get very inspired, right? And think too with a lot of grandiosity. So it's good to have a sheikh, especially at that point, to guide you, someone to guide you, so that you can reach the soul of serenity or the soul of tranquility, nafs al mutma'inna.
There's two voices, Shaitan and Allah, in the third nafs, and you really can't tell the difference between them. Yeah.
Ah, thank you.
The enlightened nafs, yeah.
The enlightenment. The nafs al mutma'inna is kind of like a capstone to this whole thing. Even though there's three more levels of the nafs, once you reach that soul of serenity, once you've been guided past the tricky maze of whether it's God's voice or Satan's voice, then you get beyond that to the soul of serenity. Then after the soul of tranquility, the soul of serenity, the nafs al mutma'inna, is the nafs al mardiya, the soul that is satisfied with God. Then one step up above that is the nafs al radiya, which is a soul that satisfies, pleases God. And then the next one after that is nafs al zakiya, the nafs of purity. Zakiya is a word for purity, and it's also sometimes called nafs al safiya. But people like nafs al zakiya partly because that phrase is in the Quran. The Quran doesn't have the phrase nafs al safiya, but they're synonyms. They mean the same thing. The soul of purification, the soul of purity. They mean the same exact thing. Soul of purification. But these are all ramifications of that, as I understand it, as I've been taught, ramifications of the fourth level, ramifications of the soul of tranquility, the soul of serenity. There's a beautiful passage in the Quran at the end of the 89th chapter about the nafs al mutma'inna, the soul of serenity. Oh, come soul of serenity, come into paradise with the other devotees. It's very beautiful. 89th chapter, last three verses. You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Barkat, did you finish your question? Barkat, did you finish your question? Okay, go ahead, Rahana.
Rehana.
Rihanna.
Talat, what's your opinion of the difference between ego and identity? I really get hung up with this quite a bit.
You got me stumped. I don't know what to say. I think of them as being the same thing.
Really?
Identity is the story of your ego. Identity is the story that your ego tells about itself. So they're very similar.
So if I say I am a Sufi, that is an ego thing?
Not
Or I
necessarily ego. That could be an existential statement,
Mhm.
not necessarily an egotistical statement. Depends on what you mean when you say it. It depends on like what your intention is when you say those words.
Okay, so it's intention. Okay, thanks.
So, are you a Sufi? Inshallah. Be a good answer. Be a great answer. But yes is an okay answer too, depending on where you're coming from.
Okay,
Like,
Next.
wow, I'm a Sufi, or
I'm better than
inshallah.
I'm a Sufi. I'm a healing conductor. Therefore, I'm better than you. Right? That's obviously ego.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sometimes I joke that Astaghfirullah should be at the end of the zikr, because we're not capable of really feeling it when we begin.
Well, maybe that's why Sharif Baba always started with Bismillah and then Astaghfirullah, as I sometimes say.
Say that, but every time I did zikr with him, he started with astaghfirullah. So I don't know.
I'm
But
just
I also
pulling
like
you.
how the Mevlevis sometimes say astaghfirullah azim el kareem. They add that on it, and Jalaluddin went all the way with astaghfirullah and just had him do that for the zikr. I thought that was very sensible. Um, and the one other thing I sometimes think about is that a guy who was sometimes called a Sufi named Idris Shah, in one of his books, uh, quotes a pre-Sufi, before the word got created, who I think one of his names is Dul Nun. He has also an Arabic name, but I don't remember that.
That is his Arabic
That
name.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, he says the ordinary person says astaghfirullah for their sins. The elect say astaghfirullah for forgetting, for not remembering. So that's what we say it for in the zikr. We've not fulfilled our obligation to remember our Lord. So
I'd like to piggyback on what Rahana said. Did I pronounce
Rehana.
it? Rehana.
yeah,
And I know several people on this screen intimately, and some of you are new to me. But in my tribe of Sufism, there's a lot of hierarchical things, and when I came into it, it was like this path of love, and then there's this hierarchical part where you get to different stages, and it's by numbers, and and I say this because my beloved Hamza is on the screen with me, and he is my Sufi guide since the passing of my Murshid of many years. But I eventually became what's called the ninth degree and got initiated to be, in the ninth degree and be a teacher or do whatever. And I was a healing conductor before, and I was a shrag before I was a ninth degree. And in the process of the beautiful, ritualistic thing, it's like now you're a Sufi. And, we came out of this great old church in Kansas City, and we were standing next to a dumpster in the parking lot. And my beloved Hamza said, "So we've been striving to be a Sufi all these years, and now that you are one, what are you going to do?" I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, and on the Rafahi path that I, there's none of that kind of hierarchy or anything, but I don't know. Remember that, Hamza?
I thought you were going to say he threw you in the dumpster.
No, but he wanted to say, so now you really have to be totally accepting of everything. And I won't go into it here because it's sort of personal, but he went into some scenarios that would be very challenging, and I don't know. Thank you for bringing that up, because about ego, and it just really hooked into how I feel. And I know Kanan and Hamza, I don't think they've met, and I'm not sure Shirin has met Hamza, but I'm
No.
glad we're all here together.
All together now we sing our song. Hey, I want to bring up the concept of pretense.
Go.
So in Jinshin,
Where's your face moving? Your
can't
picture's.
you? I'm a ventriloquist dummy.
Oh, you look handsome, but
Thanks. You're throwing me off my track.
sorry.
So pretense. In Jinshin, one of the treatments is a treatment for pretense. So I thought a lot about pretense, And I used to live in the Ozarks with a woman named Carla Mell, and she used to say, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. So what makes sense to me is pretense is trying to look better than you are actually experiencing, or like we hide the little shadows, and it relates to this discussion somewhere, Talat, about you were talking about what was that other word?
Grandiosity.
Yeah, thank you, grandiosity. So pretense is a form of grandiosity, but you get to pretend that you're kind of cool. You're not really sticking your stuff out there. You're not strutting your stuff, but underneath it all, you feel like you could strut your stuff if you wanted to, or you needed to, or whatever. And so the antidote for pretense is to hold on to your little finger until you feel a pulse. That's the Jin Shin treatment.
Cool. Yeah, Aziz.
Oh,
Yeah, Aziz. Pretense and grandiosity are totally related. And
Absolutely.
yeah, Aziz is apparently one of the means is good treatment for that condition.
I think what I have observed in different traditions, I'm in a Qigong tradition right now, and all the Sufi teachers that I've been with, what their example has, and even my shamanic teacher, is they are truly genuine. They are truly, truly, truly doing service, and that's where I see the difference between ego, grandiosity, or whatever, and somebody who just brings it out there because they just want to do a service and be of service. And I've really have seen that in quite a few people. So I'm very grateful for those examples. I think sometimes where it comes in, say, where you have to do a resume and you have to brag about yourself, to get a job, or you have a certain title in a company or something like that. That's where I wonder where the line is with the difference. But I have these wonderful examples of just these people that just want to be just genuine. So it's been really great. It's been really good. Even you, Talat. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Awesome. Oh, it's great sharing the names with you all. Ghafar, Ghafur, Tawab, Afu.
Shamsuddin, can you hear me?
Of course, I can hear you.
I wish I could see you. Are
Your
you?
wish is my command. There as I am.
Aw, are you coming home pretty soon?
Yeah, a day or two before Thanksgiving, I think.
Cool.
We were thinking about having a little bit of a gathering at Kareem's so that we wouldn't upset the Heart Song board, but we were talking about Sham's kits, you guys and Craig and Sky and all that, them folks.
Yeah, Shams won't want to go to Kareem's, but
Maybe
why not
not.
go to Leela's?
That'd be
I'm
okay.
not
I
going anywhere.
might have it. I
Hush,
won't
hush.
have it done. I won't have it cleaned up enough by then.
Oh, right. Or go to Craig and Sky's.
So
Yeah.
I have a question, Talat, to get us back on point.
Sorry.
Not there, no apologies necessary. Ya afu. Wipe clean, ya afu. Ya Kadir and Ya Mukadir. Is that a way? Huh?
Muqtadir.
Thanks. Mukadir. Is that a way to deal with the pretense or being accused of being pretentious?
I think so in the sense that the way that Qadr is the root word for this predestination or destiny. How do Muslims actually practice Qadr? And the way is two ways: Inshallah and MashaAllah. Those are the two ways that people practice Qadr. So, in that sense, yes to your question.
Yeah. Because, what I do for a living involves this gift that happens with me, which is from Allah, from God. So I feel myself on this razor's edge most of the time. And I'm confronted by people who want to say that I'm egoed out. And I'm also confronted by people that say you are such a blessing to humanity. And it's kind of like, here I am on this razor's edge going, I hear y'all. And I know the talk about what it is I'm doing. So it's kind of like, Rihanna. I like that she brought that up, because it's real. It's real to a lot of people.
To all human.
You know what I mean? What she said? I can't hear her. What'd you say?
Shakori, he's talking to you.
Oh, it's for all human beings. It's a part of what makes us human, and why we do all these practices. And some people think of reincarnation and like coming back again and again. I mean, that's the basis of being human, and all of this is, if you really look at it, it's all kind of guided to, I don't like to say flaws, but the things that don't maybe work all right, it's laid out there for us if we can be open to it and see it, and see it in one another. And I hate to sound preachy, I'm a little Hazrat Night Khan leaning, but it's nature, and people, human beings have guilt and pain.
The Qadir is the strength. Is the strength that comes from the divine power within us.
Yes.
And that's what I dig about it. So, whether we're being accused of being pretentious, or whether we find ourselves dancing that fine rope of pretension, to promote ourselves or to make ourselves popular, or whatever people do in this humanity, we have these wazifas to, like,
wash things clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because there's Hawk, and then there's the Hawkettes. If I may stretch that into popular singing kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the Hawkettes are the background singers. It's all the stuff that's happening in the background, and not what is, let me in.
But really, Hawk is the thing that's the most present. I mean, that's really not I don't know, in my upbringing, the Rafahi anyway, you wouldn't kind of make, I mean, that's like, Hawk and Ashk are the two biggest seeds we have in that tradition, I think, right?
Yeah.
And Hawk is just what it is. It's what's right. What's right.
Yeah, it's a good definition of haq as what's right.
There's no Hawkettes. Hawkettes is not ever in, Hawk is never in the background. For us to live as good people, dear Rob, let us be good people, let other people be good people. We have to, Hawk is the first thing, and the understanding of Ashk, which, in our Western culture, we have this word love, and it means a zillion different things. But if there's anything I learned with the Rafahi, is the importance of Hawk and Ashk. And Ashk is this greatest love that, it's 25 dimensions different than any word we have for love in our Western culture. But, so Hawk has to be in front of us every breath, like keeping our You know, we can say wazifas all day, or we can, you know, have our beads be all shiny, but if we aren't walking with Huck and have an understanding of Ashk, which goes beyond anything, then none of it means anything. We can do 1,001 wazifas an hour, and it doesn't make up for not walking with Huck and understanding Ashk. That's a very watered down version, Sharon, Astagfirullah.
No, it's
wasn't
not.
so eloquent.
The hadith says that all actions are judged by their intentions.
Yeah.
Something watered
Yes.
down.
She meant
Right
well.
out of the book.
Yeah, she meant well. But, you know, that's just
Who meant well? Oh, you.
Masha.
Are you the she?
I think so.
Yeah, Hassan, you know, I mean, it's the nature of most people, especially people who are not really too self-aware to, as you know, project onto you whatever it is they are experiencing themselves and whatever, however they understand things. So it's something that a person has to be able to protect themselves from, and forgiveness and love are components of that. But because really the more when one is a little bit wobbly, there'll be more projections coming at you. Even in to the extent that, you know, is the voice coming Shaitan or Allah? You know, it's when that stuff gets a little bit settled down, it's a little bit easier to have some smooth sailing to some extent. And Ashk, I mean, you know, we did all those wonderful esmas, but aren't they all included in Ashk, my dear? Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
so many traditions say, yeah, there's this way to get to Allah, there's that way to get to God, and the quickest way is through the heart.
I mean.
It's like a shortcut.
Yeah.
It's a juicy path.
And like the ninth degree, what are you going to do when you get there?
Well, that was the conversation standing outside this church at the dumpster. It was sort of like, so now what do you do?
Chop wood, kick.
Bodhisattva.
I did talk to Baba about it, because it's kind of like the more I learned about the organization, the less I was passionately in love with it. But it was my tribe of people here, for sure. And I spoke with Baba about it at length, and he said, Shakura, you know, you're already a teacher. I only teach teachers. And if they need you to stand in that circle, if Kabir needs you to stand in that circle, you need to do that. And I said, okay. But, you know, really, I mean, my life hasn't changed that much. I still teach and serve, but there's like this hierarchy thing in my tribe. But it's my family tribe, and so it's okay. Right, oh guide, I'm all right.
Your guide is muted.
It's because his picture's up. He's doing something else. Nick can't sit still that long.
Talat, how would you say beautifully in English, Wala hala wala quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim?
There is no strength There is no strength nor power but in God, the most magnificent.
Thank you.
I don't know how good that is, but that's what.
She was asking for beautiful.
I wasn't asking for good. I was asking for beautiful. Whiz both.
I'll work on it. But there is no strength nor power but in God, the most magnificent. It's a beautiful phrase.
Well, then there's no such thing as pretense.
Some people would say it's illusion.
Or a grandiose ego or something.
Yeah, it's what you feed it to be. You know, it's yours. I mean, when it's yours, it's what you feed it to be.
Okay, I get that. Yafu.
Rafu.
I don't want none of that. What's your pleasure, Talat?
I think I'm very grateful to you all for
Will you sing to us?
joining in. Yes, I can do that.
Would you?
Yeah. Let's do Khatum. We'll do it twice because some of you haven't heard the music to it, and some of you have. So, anyway. O thou who art the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the Lord of heaven and earth, open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly comes from within. Disclose to us thy divine light, which is hidden in our souls, that we may know and understand life better. Most merciful and compassionate God, give us thy great goodness. Teach us thy loving forgiveness. Raise us above the distinctions and differences which divide. Send us the peace of thy divine Spirit and unite us all in thy perfect being. So, for those of you for whom the song is new, let's do it one more time. It won't be so new anymore. O thou who art the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the Lord of heaven and earth, open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly comes from within. Disclose to us thy divine light, which is hidden in our souls, that we may know and understand life better. Most merciful and compassionate God, give us thy great goodness. Teach us thy loving forgiveness. Raise us above the distinctions and differences which divide. Send us the peace of thy divine Spirit and unite us all in thy perfect being. Amen, yo. That's available on my SoundCloud site, soundcloud.com/Talat Halman, and you're there if you want to learn the musical khatum. There's about a dozen songs on there, so enjoy. Thank you all very much. Blessings and peace.